everyone, and welcome back to another episode of TASB Talks. As always, we're here to give you the latest happenings and insights into Texas public education. I'm your host, Matt Mitchell, Senior Communications Specialist here at TASB, and I'm joined once again by my colleague, Dax Gonzalez, Division Director of TASB Governmental Relations. Welcome back. How's your week going?
It's going great, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Perfect. Well, let's just jump right into it then. It's obviously been about 2 weeks now since txEDCON. That's the largest gathering of educational leaders in Texas, and I can safely say that I am now fully recovered from my first one. I don't know about you.
No, I love it. txEDCON is one of my favorite times of the year, and it does take a few days afterwards to kind of get my legs back under me. But it was a great turnout. Saw a lot of familiar faces, a lot of new faces that were eager to be involved, and so it was a good time.
Yeah, and I know that it was an especially busy week for your team, and so let's just kind of touch on a few of the things that you were involved in, and I'll start in chronological order. I know first and foremost there were some board meetings and sessions that your team was involved in. Can you just kind of talk a bit about what those meetings were, what was discussed?
Yeah, so convention is really the time where our advocacy agenda comes together, and all the steps leading up to that meet at txEDCON. So at the very beginning for us in GR is really meeting with the board, our TASB board, that is taking in all of the recommendations that have come up through the Legislative Advisory Council or directly from school boards through the resolutions process. And that gives them an opportunity to kind of review what's moving forward and make their final recommendations to the Delegate Assembly, which happens a couple of days after those meetings at txEDCON. So that is the first step of our journey there at convention.
Right. And then of course Friday afternoon, another big event that happened. That's the SBAN luncheon. That's the School Board Advocacy Network, and I was actually there, and I thought it was extremely interesting as my first time being at one of these. So can you just kind of tell our audience, for those who weren't there, what went on? First of all, what is this luncheon, and what went on during this luncheon?
Right. So the School Board Advocacy Network, or SBAN, is our group of trustees who have elected to be active in the advocacy process. And so they receive our legislative reports, they receive action alerts that we send out regularly through session. And the luncheon is really just a time for them to come together to actually network, to meet each other, to discuss issues that are happening, and to hear from legislators. We had Representative Ken King there from Canadian, who came down to talk about his thoughts on the upcoming session. So it gives them a chance to learn about what's going to be happening and ways to get involved, and is really just it's a nice gathering going into this upcoming session.
And what can attendees take out of that luncheon? What are some actionable steps they can take coming directly out of that luncheon?
Well, we've been really fortunate the past few years to have speakers legislators who were really explicit about ways that trustees could get involved and the way to reach out to their local legislators, the kind of information that's helpful to share with legislators, and also most importantly is to not forget the staff in legislative offices. And so each meeting for the past few years has really featured actionable, concrete steps that trustees can take. And I feel like that this was no different. And Representative King he's been in the legislature for a while now, started off as a trustee, and really brings a wealth of experience and knowledge and on previous education issues, but also had a lot of great foresight on things that were coming down the pike regarding education. So it was just a really great time, and it's just another benefit of being part of SBAN.
Yeah, like I said, I was there myself, and I was very interested in the whole thing. I thought Representative King did a great job speaking to the crowd there, and I just thought it was very exciting to be a part of that, and I can tell what a valuable experience that would be for all the trustees who were there.
Yeah, and so then right after that, next door, we had a panel of State Board of Education members who came and spoke, and we've been featuring this panel for some years now. I don't remember when it started, but we invite State Board of Education members to come and share with our membership what the SBOE does. And I think that's something that not everyone is always familiar with. They think, well, they work on TEKS, but they do a lot of other things beyond just curriculum. They work on rules on training for school board members. They work on charter applications. They have the ability to veto the commissioner's decisions on charter awards. And so there's a lot that they do. And so it is really nice to bring them in and just give our members one more opportunity to learn how things happen in Austin, who's working on what, and how they can impact the process.
Now, I know txEDCON is obviously one of our biggest events of the year. Are there any other opportunities post txEDCON leading into the new year, or even like into the new year, that trustees can be involved in that are kind of similar to the luncheon and these other board meetings?
Certainly, certainly. So we have a couple of big events coming up that are the next opportunities for this kind of learning. We will have in January, late January, our Texas Federal Advocacy Conference up in Washington, D.C. And this is a really great experience for those trustees who either don't really know what happens at the federal level and how much of a role the feds do play in Texas public education, because they do oversee a lot of our accountability, our special education services that we have to provide, child nutrition, just different things that the feds do that really help our members understand how that interaction works. And so it's good for those that maybe don't know a lot about that, but it's also great for those who have been there and experienced that already to come back and help mentor other trustees, or just to really touch base again with Congress members up there and helping to share the needs and the successes that are happening back home in Texas.
And for those listeners who are perhaps interested in the Federal Advocacy Conference, you can actually register now at tasb.org. That's certainly a great event. We're going to be looking forward to that. I'm sure we'll circle back to that in future episodes. But I wanted to kind of get back to txEDCON and kind of the main event, and you touched on it earlier, but that's Delegate Assembly, one of the most important TASB membership meetings of the year, really. So can you just kind of talk about, what sort of action items were discussed and voted on this time around?
Yeah, so Delegate Assembly is where it all comes together. This is where our membership has the opportunity to vote on the leadership of TASB, to vote on the advocacy agenda, our legislative program for TASB, and even our bylaws, which are the way that we will run the organization. So when we say that we are a member-driven organization, we really are, and we go to great lengths to make sure that occurs. And so we operate on a 2-year biennial program in our advocacy agenda. And so this was the first year. So it was a brand new slate of priorities that they got to adopt, a brand new slate of resolutions they got to adopt. They amended our cornerstone principles to update and refresh those. I believe we had some bylaws changes that were approved, and we got to elect some new officers and board directors to TASB. So very exciting. And I believe they all did it in record time. I don't know if it was record time, Matt. Don't quote me on that. But in pretty good time. I think we were done in a couple hours or so. It seemed to fly by, at least on my end. And so I feel like folks were really happy with the final product. And that is now what they've adopted. That will be our marching orders going forward and the things that we're going to go seek at the Capitol.
Yeah, you mentioned that they're kind of your marching orders. How else do these priorities and resolutions kind of play into TASB's advocacy going forward? I know you mentioned is it every 2 to 4 years that they adopt new ones?
So it's every 2 years we start out with a brand new agenda. In the off year, if you want to call it an off year, they have the opportunity to amend those priorities and those resolutions. But yeah, those priorities are really the things that we aggressively pursue in Austin before the legislature, before regulatory bodies like the Texas Education Agency, and up in D.C. as well, if there's any federal issues on there. So, when I say it all the time, when we go to the Capitol or we're talking to folks, it's not what I want. It's not what TASB GR wants. It is what our membership has asked us to do, and so we do our best to reflect that.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's very exciting to hear about that. Very exciting time coming up. And just, again, txEDCON, my first time being at one of these, I had a blast. I thought it was a very cool event. I would highly, highly recommend anyone listening who's interested attend for sure. And kind of pivoting to non-txEDCON related topics now as we kind of finish this off, is there anything else that's happened in the last week, or perhaps anything coming up that you want to talk about that's not related to txEDCON?
Well, the legislature is still plowing through their interim charges, so they're having interim hearings on different items. And I really need to bring in Kelly Rosti and she's the Associate Executive Director of TASB Governmental Relations, have her come in and talk about her recent testimony at the Senate Finance hearing that happened just yesterday. I think she did a great job of outlining some of the issues specifically pertaining to enrollment changes in the state, because that's what the committee was hearing. They were one of their charges is to discuss enrollment trends in Texas, because they've got to fund it. So we'll have her on maybe in a couple weeks to talk about that and maybe some of the other interim hearings that are going on. But I should also mention, Matt, that we have the TASB Legislative Conference coming up in February. I believe it's February 18th. For those listeners who have been there before, they know it, and we always get great feedback coming out of it. But it's basically a half day of learning and a half day of advocating up at the Capitol. So we'll bring in legislators for them to hear updates on what's going on in Austin, their plans for this coming session, how they see things playing out. So it really is a great learning opportunity and a chance to hear from some of those lawmakers who have been there a while, some that have new ideas. It really is a fascinating few hours. And then after that, we bus folks over to the Capitol and have them go meet with their local legislators. And it really is exciting to be walking the halls and seeing all of these trustees, moving these little groups, going from office to office, and just, doing what's best for their kids, and that's advocating on behalf of them.
That is incredibly exciting, and I think we'll certainly want to talk more about that as we get closer. And but yeah, again, we'll have Kelly on next episode. I love that idea. And speaking of next episode, that is all the time we have today. But I just want to say thanks so much for coming back. Episode 2 with us together is in the books, and I don't know about you, but I'm looking forward to many more.
Yeah, no, that's I'm ready, and I think we have a rotating cast of characters. I think it'll be a great time.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thanks again, Docs, and I want to say thanks to our audience, and to make sure to subscribe to the TASB Talks podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and we will see you next time.